we are going to do a little tribute to Mike Kummer, who is the legendary host of this show. And as everybody by now should know, he played a challenge match against one of the players in the US Junior Close that was held here several weeks ago. He is the US Junior Open champion, Curran Han. And the challenge was that they'll play a certain variation of the two knights defense, like an Armageddon game. And the winner, well, actually, I think that Han had nothing to lose. Just Mike put $50 of his own money. And of course, in an Armageddon game, the player who gets the white pieces must play for a win. Black has draw odds. So after a game full of mistakes, the game ended in a draw, and Mike had to pay $50 to Han. And we are going to analyze this game, first of all, make sure that we cover all of Mike Kummer's brilliancies in this game, and his opponent's shortcomings a little bit. And then we will see another game, and that second game is going to be how to do it properly, with a recent example by two top-of-the-line grandmasters playing the same variation exactly. So without further ado, we are going to go with the game. E4, E5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6. I have heard that Mr. Kummer is very critical of this move. This in itself makes me roll my eyes a little bit. Probably one of the better moves in the position. He tries to refute it with the following knight g5. Very impressive. A direct attack on f7. And now Black has basically two choices. He can play the gambit, bishop to c5. This is not the Trexler variation. A very crazy line. The intention is if knight takes f7, bishop takes f2 check. If I had a lecture for 10 hours, maybe we can deal with it. However, we don't have 10 hours. The correct move would be bishop takes f7. Excuse me, I'm coughing. I have a cold. So, alternatively, if he doesn't want to lose the pawn on f7 in a real miserable way, and he doesn't want to put his queen here like some kids do and take and lose a lot of material, then the alternative is to play the ambitious move d5, which is probably the best move in the position. Now the white pawn is attacked on e4 and the bishop on c4. This is very much resembling the game that I have shown here to the Sunday class, the kid class, but that's not the same game, obviously. Pawn takes, knight a5. Again, like I've mentioned in that aforementioned lecture, playing knight takes d5 and allowing knight takes f7 is a very, very dangerous variation. After the forced capture and I go check, if you don't want to lose your knight and have lost the right to castle and a pawn, your king must come here. And I'm sure that all chess players who have a sane mind and a desire to play chess for fun would not play this variation, because that's just not smart and not fun. After knight c3, it's just a huge, huge, huge attack. So back we go. And Black plays the alternative, one of many, by the way. b5 and knight d4 are also playable. But this is a very nice line, knight a5, challenging the bishop. It is very well known that if white tries to protect the bishop, let's say d3, then after here, here, e4, and already Black is having a very, very good time here. The bishop looks really funny. I've seen some line where they sacrifice the piece for the, take the pawn and sack the piece, but that's a very speculative continuation. In our game, however, after knight a5, he goes bishop to d3, bishop to b5 check, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. And once again, Black has a choice of either gambiting a pawn for real, like he does in this game, or sheepishly playing the move bishop d7. I really don't like bishop d7 because after takes, this was a very good trade from Black's point of view. So, on we're going with the game, c6. Of course, we must take, taking with the pawn. Again, I'll repeat what I said on Sunday, that this is a very funny gambit in the sense that Black gets a funny pawn structure, a broken pawn structure. He has a knight on the rim, and he is down a pawn. However, he gets a lot of time, a lot of tempi for this, and let's see how that happens. First of all, the bishop has to move. The game that I've shown on Sunday involved the normal retreat of bishop to e2, after which we kick the knight away. The knight went here, we kick it again, the knight must jump here, and then Black has several interesting moves to deal with this knight, one of which is queen d4 or bishop c5, bishop d6. In that game that I showed, queen c7 was played, and you should refer to it. You should go, it's in the video library of the club, and I think it was a very interesting game and kind of a lesser known game. In our game, however, our player plays the move bishop to d3. This is kind of a combination of old and new, trying to revive the variation by putting the bishop on that square. And here, I'm not a big believer in this variation, even though I've seen Nakamura play it and win. I think that this is something just not right about this line, because many times in this line the knight goes to d5 and f4, then he takes the bishop here, and it's really hard for me to believe that with this kind of structure, white has really any advantage. But some people like it. Okay, so you can already imagine that I'm recommending the move knight d5, but as you will see from the game between the grandmasters, it's not the only move. You can play h6 first and then knight d5. However, after h6, knight e4, again, knight d5 and knight f4 is what I would like to see. But our player, who is probably not super familiar with the variation, or at least wasn't bothered to look at the main line, he played bishop e7. Okay, not my favorite move. Again, I think that the knight on f6 is simply worth more than the knight on e4. Why? Because again, like I said, on d5 he's going to go to f4, combining some tickling on the king side, and especially this poor bishop. And the knight on e4 looks impressive right now, but when my f-pawn goes twice to f5, it's going to just go away. It's not stable. Okay, so castles, again, not the most accurate move. In my opinion, he should have taken the knight on f6 right here. This happens very soon, but he should have taken it now. And the reason is, once again, not to allow knight d5, f4. So, castles, of course, knight d5. But he just castled, takes, and takes. Needless to say that with every even trade that we are witnessing, this actually plays directly into white's hands. Because if he could have snapped his finger and have all the pieces off the board, he is going to win a king and pawn ending that any child can win against Carlsen. Because an extra pawn and a broken pawn structure, there's just nothing for black. So every trade that we do without purpose is just a step in that direction. Of course, there's still many steps to be taken. And right now, the whole queen side looks a little funny. Now Mike decided to play the move knight to c3. Okay, in itself a reasonable move. Alternatives, probably rook e1 was possible, but okay, knight c3 I can't complain about. c5, I think this move is really early. The idea is clear. He wants to use his useless pawn on the c-file to create something. So right now he wants to advance it to c4, attack the bishop, chase it away, gain more space, put some load on the d and b pawns. And sure enough, Mike doesn't respond to it correctly. He played the move knight e4. Again, he wants to trade pieces. In itself, like I said, not a bad idea. But I don't like the timing of that. This was really a high time to play a move like, let's say, maybe b3, to put the bishop on b2, stop the pawn from going to c4. If he goes to c4, I'm just going to take it. I don't care if you win it later, but at least I'll get my bishop developed. After b3, I'm also entertaining ideas like bishop a3 on the long diagonal. All of a sudden, this pawn can become a little bit passive and in seek of help. So in any event, the game continued knight e4, c4. Again, what was the rush? Maybe bishop e7 first? And the point is that the bishop e7, if you try to play something like b3 or one of those moves, my pawns are starting to move really fast here. Again, a tempo with f5 and then maybe e4, and I'm just gaining a lot of space and a lot of time. So, of course, I can't be too critical because remember, this is an Armageddon game. It's a Blitz game. It's not a tournament time condition game. So we have to respect that. So c4, knight f6, another trade, why not? Here, bishop to e4, good tempo. Rook to b8. Of course, bishop to b7 just trades more pieces. So even though the bishop on c8 doesn't look like a charm right now, better off this way. Now I really didn't like what Mike did. I really think that his move is not terrible in itself, but sometimes timing is everything. He went queen to f3. I believe that in this position it would have been a lot more prudent to play once again the move b3. Pawn to b3. This was really a good move here. Listen, the rook is sitting on the b2 square, and the bishop on c1 doesn't really know how he's going to see the light of day. Let's solve both problems, kill two birds with one stone. b3, and the bishop comes out either to b2 or a3. Life is not that bad. So queen f3, and paradoxically what I meant to say that this, let's say b3, And let's pretend black goes something like, oops, that really makes no sense. Let's say he goes queen e6, and now the idea is to play f5. Now white can play the move queen f3. That I really like. This is a much better move order than what Mike has chosen, because now f5 bishop d5 is out of the question. Excuse me, and I'm threatening to play bishop d5 anyways. If you go bishop e7, I just take it. So now the bishop is coming either to a3 or b2. I'm really starting to like white in that kind of a structure. Definitely extra pawn, lots of pieces getting off the board. What is my problem? I don't have any weaknesses anymore. Once I develop my pieces and take care of my b pawn, maybe the d pawn is going to be a bit weak, but clearly white with two bishops is not doing worse. So in the game he went queen f3, and maybe he just underestimated black's response, because it's very counterintuitive, especially in lieu of everything that I said, to trade pieces. But sometimes under the right circumstances, a good trade is warranted. And taking the queen is correct. Bishop takes. Now he thought for a while and played the move rook e8. Okay, I'm not saying that this is a blunder or anything, but I think that bishop f5 immediately was clearly the best move. Developing the last minor, you don't know where this rook belongs. Maybe you want to pressure the d pawn. I'm not so sure why the rook has to be here. I'm sure that the bishop has to be on f5. Like I tell all my students, when you have a choice between two moves, and all things being equal, choose the more flexible one, the one that you're positive about its placement. Here the bishop has no better place than f5, tickling the pawn on c3, dying to see it move, because once it moves, the pawn on d4 is going to look really funny. So, and if it doesn't move, I might just take it. So maybe white has to play some move like bishop d1. Listen, if I have to play bishop f5, bishop d1, and now it's my move, this insertion of moves didn't hurt me one bit. I'm quite happy about it. However, rook e8 was played. So, rook to e1, bishop f5, bishop e4. Of course, this move was not possible if the rooks were on f8 and f1. So, a little bonus for white. Takes, and f5. And now Mike played a relatively fast move and a mistake, a big mistake. He's still really doing okay. But in positions like this, and again, of course, the shortage of time probably played a big part in this deal. The question is what to do with the rook. The rook has lots of legal moves. It seems the most logical, because rooks are very clumsy when they're playing from close. You always want to put the rooks from a distance. It looks like it's a piece that operates well from a distance. But in a situation like this, you really have to respect the opponent's threats. And this knight that looks really clumsy now, he wants to get revived. In other words, he wants to go to c6, and then visit one of the dark squares, like d4, b4. In lieu of that, it was time to make a decision to play rook e3. That would have been a very, very strong move. Because now, if black wants to play knight c6, he has to reckon with the move rook to c3. And it's not so easy to defend the pawn on c4. Maybe knight a5 is even forced, because rook b4, I'm just going to go a3 and b3. So, yeah, as you can see here, white is a bit behind development, but if I take another pawn, and I'm going to get my king closer, eventually this is just going to be winning. So that was very, very good. Probably knight c6 is not the most accurate move. Maybe he has to play rook bc8 or some idea king f7 and just not let the rook win the pawn. However, Mike played the move rook to e1. And now I'm sure that you already see that after knight c6 he's in deep trouble. He is really in trouble here because the knight wants to go to d4 and, well, it actually got to go to d4. You will see in a second things got from bad to worse. And of course the only way to stop it is to play a move like c3. Yeah, notice that rook e3 doesn't work anymore. Rook e3, knight here, then, oops, sorry. If I go here, check, and wins the rook. So, an exchange rather. So not so good. Probably the only move to play here is c3, but I don't have to tell you how ugly this move looks. After pawn c3, the d3 square, the d2 pawn is backwards, the bishop is stuck, can't even play b3. I would much rather be black than white in that position. I think black has a significant advantage despite his pawn deficit. That's not a good sign. So in the game, he completely blundered with b3, and now knight d4, game over. Completely. If I had this position and I didn't win in the next 10 moves, I would be really disappointed in myself. Because, okay, what else do you need? It's like you're up a pawn, you're about to win more stuff. It really is beyond saving. And of course, Mike was not very happy with his position. This is where he was starting to make all kinds of funny noises, as you can see in the video, and all kinds of words to the effect that he's going to lose $50. Yeah. So he played here, rook e2, and of course, black has not only does he have 2 pawns, I mean, not only did he get his pawn back, but he's also having a dominating position. White is going to lose more material for sure. I think that I would have played the move a5 here. When I'm looking at this move, I'm thinking, how can you not play a move like this? Everything is pinned, the bishop is stuck, the rook is very passive, more space, everything you can dream about. And I'm about to go a4, and this pawn is going to really hurt. So what he did wasn't so terrible. He took on b3. And here Mike almost blundered. Thank God that this game was not touch move, because his initial reaction was to play here, after which this move is very strong. I'm attacking 2 rooks. Normally you would play a move like this to kind of get rid of it, but I have my own interpolation move, my own in-between move check, and yeah, very costly. Lucky for him, it was not touch move, and he caught himself right in time, and he took like this. However, the position is still lost. So he played knight d4. Again, not the only move, but a decent one. Rook e3, f4. He went back to e1. Rook to c8. Again, I mean, this is where the blitz stage goes into really serious time trouble. It's hard to really be too critical, but there's one point here that I was really puzzled by. He played bishop a3, which immediately brings the move knight c2 into the game. That cannot be missed. And desperate, because he's being forked, bishop on a3 and the rook on e1, he made the move bishop to d6. Now, sometimes you have to ask yourself a very simple question. Okay, of course the taking here wasn't exactly a disaster, but why? Your rook is attacked by a bishop, and that knight is attacked by a bishop. This rook is attacked by a knight. The only difference is that this knight is already protected, and this bishop isn't. So all you had to do is go here. Now you're attacking the bishop, still attacking the rook. You can win this pawn, but I'm going to take an exchange. I really, really like that kind of deal. So even in time trouble, I think that this is strange to miss. In any event, he took, and Mike took, and takes, and takes, and takes. A nice bonus pawn. All of a sudden, from being a pawn up in the opening because of the sacrifice, all of a sudden he is down a pawn and struggling in a rook ending. Of course, this rook ending should have been lost completely. I mean, a little technical work, but it should have been lost. But somehow Mike manages to stay alive. Watch how. Of course, pawn e5 is safe because rook b1 is leading to checkmate. And so he went king f1, rook b5. Yep, now that there's no mate, let's defend our pawn. King e2. Kudos to Mike for choosing the best plan and just moving forward, finally. And king f7, king d3. Now he played very fast king e6. Not a big blunder. I would have preferred to have played something like a5, so that if king c4, then rook b4 check tempo, then king e6. But okay, he played here, here. Okay, now again, there are several moves that make sense in this position. And to me, it seems very logical to stay on the, excuse me, on the 5th rank. Because then I can easily play a5 and the pawn will be protected. The rook is guarding my king. My king can just go this way if I feel like it. And the rook is also attacking the pawn on d2. So if it was me, I would have played here. Just makes sense. Okay, what he did was he played rook here. And, well, I mean, I suppose king c3 is the most logical response. But Mike goes to a decent strategy that's, let's trade as many pawns as possible. And he goes d4. Not unreasonable. I'd say that this is normal. So now this is forced. Check. King d6. And of course, Mike Doesn't want to just lose those 2 pawns for nothing. So he plays a very decent move, rook f5. I think that I would have played the move rook here. I'd be very curious to see how my opponent would respond to a move like rook d5 check. Is he going to go this way and distance himself even more from those important pawns? Or he's going to go the other way, after which I'll check him again. He's going to have to go to the f file if he doesn't want to repeat. And then when I go something like rook a5 and take this pawn, my king and this pawn become really, really a factor. Like I've said before in the endings class, like the one we're having later tonight, in the rook ending, the placement of the pieces is more important than the number of the pawns. That is really, really true. So just to fantasize for a moment, a non-forced variation, something like, let's say, oopsie. Let's say if you go here, 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 let's say takes and takes. And yeah, of course, black should win this position, but I'm already seeing chances for white by playing king up, or pawn up, and this pawn can become a little bit of a headache. All of a sudden here, you better calculate. So I'm positive that it should be winning. Anyways. So, sorry. In our game after this, he went here. Rook c2 check. Not really necessary. But okay, check. Here, here. And he took, and rook f7. The only move. Clearly the only move. Now, normally, 2 pawns against 1 should win. But in this position, it's very, very difficult. I think that this is a hard win. Because once again, the king and the pawn can be annoying, and the rook is going to start giving checks forever. So for now, he plays correctly. He keeps those pawns. And Mike took. And now he plays here. I think this is a bit hasty. I think what he needs to do is to try to bring the king to support the pawns, and later use the rook to go behind this pawn and prevent it from queening. That would be the best strategy. Because then the pawns can be so advanced that at the right time you can just afford to give up your rook for the pawn, even if necessary. Although we can see that this is far, far in the future. The pawn is not that advanced at all. So, okay, he goes here, check. Already the king is a bit limited. Needless to say that he should have played king e7. And if he kept checking, just zigzag this way and come here and here. But he was already in serious time trouble, and he just overlooked everything, just went here, which invites the check for sure. And after here, rook takes, and a draw was agreed after this and this. So we can say that even though he lost, yeah, played a few more moves. We can say that even though Mike lost his $50, he put a really valiant defense not to lose this endgame, but the opening definitely leaves a lot to be desired. Definitely. If we're going to go back to the opening 1 second, after here, yeah, here, a move like knight e4 is definitely a move that should be thought twice. b3 would have been much better, and I think that Mike, I would have voted for Mike in that position, because black is somehow really losing the thread. So, oh well. Okay, now we go on to a different game, and I guess we can call this game How to Do It Right. You will see an example from the highest level. Again, same variation, exactly, only this time players at a much higher rating play it. You can see the player with the white pieces is a Russian grandmaster, Alexander Riazantsev, and black is Dutch former Bosnian player Ivan Sokolov. Very, very strong players, really strong players. And this game was played in 2015 somewhere, I think, or 2014? 2014 in the French league, like pretty recent. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop, knight. We have the same line, same gambit, even the same h6, but now he goes knight d5. A much better move. The knight wants to go to f4, as mentioned before, but you have to pay attention, because if you delay it, then some bad things might happen. Castle. Now he doesn't play knight f4. I'm not sure why. I have no idea what Ivan was thinking. Bishop e7, knight g3. He's already late. All of a sudden, that one little move, developing move, and all of a sudden, knight f4 lost a lot of its value, because knight f4, I have a good square on f5 for my bishop. I'm just going to trade it. Gone are my worries. So he played h5. It's funny that in this position, when I saw the move h5, I thought to myself, that's impossible. Why would he do that? It looks like it doesn't make sense, but the computer likes it, endorses it. And there are some interesting lines behind the scenes. For example, some of you might say, why doesn't he just play normal chess? Like here, allowing here, and let's say he would play something like bishop a6. Again, this is not a forced variation, but just to show you how amazing this line can become. Here, here, and g6. At first hand, you think to yourself, this is the way to play for black. It looks like a really normal setup. Now the bishop would have to withdraw, either to h3, which is like really oblivion because of f5, and e4, also we have f5, and the bishop has to go to f3. Black maybe can play g5. It looks like a really nice position for black. He has lots of space, and white is so behind in development, but the tactics here just murder the black position. Here, there's just no hope. Bishop takes h6, pawn takes, knight takes. Again, you might look at the position and say, wait a minute, why did we sack a piece? I don't see a mate. Well, look carefully, you will see a mate in a second. Yeah, the queen is coming to g4, and this amassment of pieces of queen, knight, and bishop against the king, which has no defenders, is completely hopeless. Like if you put this in the computer, I will bet that this is, even though white is down a piece, probably he's going to say that white is the equivalent of more than a piece up. Because I think he's going to regain the piece with all the advantages. If like knight f4, with the intention of coming here with the knight, I'm just going to take it. So for example, let's see a variation. If here, I'm just going to take, and takes, and queen check, bishop g5, h4. Okay, very unappetizing from black's point of view. Clearly a lost position. This is just losing. So this is what's beautiful about this line for both sides, and that is that there's so much venom in the position. Like after castles, after castles, bishop f5, it looks like such an innocent position, but it isn't. It really isn't. Those two bishops are hungrily looking at the king side, and in a second I'm going to start developing my pieces. In the meantime, it's going to take some time to revive that silly knight on a5. And this knight was great here, but now if you come to f4, I might even have a move like d4. You're not attacking my bishop, and that bishop is all over this knight. This is going to be really, really neat. So, in any event, so he tries to challenge the knight on g3 by playing the move h5. Rook e1. White continues with his plan, picking on the e-pawn. That's a normal plan in these positions. h4, knight to f5. So, in this position, I'm simply attacking the bishop on e7, and then the pawn on g7. And of course, there's a bonus to pawn on e5. So, bishop f6 looks like a forced move here. Unless you want to give out the bishop for the knight. That would have been welcomed by white as well. We know that those trades, if bishop takes knight, bishop takes, those trades are just in my favor. I'm still attacking the pawn on e5. I have two bishops, and I'm about to go d4 if I want to. Only white can be happy in that position. But I think white is already happier here. I think by now, having not played knight f4 and allowed this, and playing this h5, h4, I'm not saying white is winning, but white is definitely for choice here, clearly. So, bishop e4, a very easy to understand move. White wants to develop his c1 bishop. He doesn't want to go on this diagonal, thinking that it might just be biting on granite. He wants to play d4. d3 or d4, that's what he wants to play. So, black played bishop e6, d4. So if Mike Kummer is watching this video, this is the way to play this opening. Pay attention when your opponent doesn't play knight f4, like your opponent hasn't. This is the way to do it. Put your pieces on good square, go d4. Now white has not only the extra pawn, but a really great position. All the deficiencies in the black position, such as the pawn and the knight, they become really evident. All right, so he played knight to b6. Not crazy about this move. However, after takes, this is also nothing to write home about, because I'm about to take your good bishop. I'm also picking on this pawn in case this knight has any ideas of moving. It's not fun. It's really not a fun position. What should he have played instead? That's a really good question. Tough to tell. Maybe knight b7 or something like that. I don't know. It's really, really not a pleasant. Maybe queen c7. Yeah, I'm voting for queen c7 here, and just extra defense against that pawn. But against queen c7, I would just take this guy, and then take this guy. Again, this is just in white's favor. White is just having a dream position here. So he went knight b6, bishop d2, instantly taking advantage of the situation. The bishop is attacking this pawn. This pawn is defended by the knight. Let's pick on that knight. That knight is a little sad. Now black plays a forced move, knight b to c4. He has got to defend his knight. And now he took the knight on a5. Again, not a bad move exactly, but why not to play b4 at once? Miserable. After b4, it's just 1-0, in my opinion. But okay, this also wasn't exactly a sad continuation. He took on a5, the knight took on a5, and now he played b4. Again, when you compare this game to the previous game, you really see that white is doing a tour de force here. Really an impressive array of moves. He just put the screws down, and I wouldn't say black didn't play anything. I mean, h4, h5, h4 was a little crazy, I agree. But this development and all this that doesn't seem enough. When you think that the player with the black pieces is a veteran 2650 grandmaster, 2650 elo, quite an impressive showing by white. So knight c4, bishop takes, king f8, and now I really like the move that he played. He took on e5. Again, why mess up things? If you take on a8, for example, and I take with my queen, now this knight is being harassed, and the pawn is coming to h3 next move. Who needs this kind of thing with a light square bishop and a queen on the long diagonal and this kind of a development? Why give chances? Absolutely not necessary. It's just greed that just makes you have to think and be really careful. So d takes e, so he had to play here, here, and save his rook and save his bishop at the same time. Okay. White trades and trades, saves his knight, knight to d4. So again, instead of just going for an exchange in a speculative position where you can be attacked and be even more material up, which is not necessary, now white is up a ton of pawns, and he is going to lose one of them probably, but he's just 1 or 2 moves away from consolidating, so who cares? Watch what happens now. Bishop c7, okay, after the pawn, here. And again, white uses a very simple tactic, because after bishop e5, it might look for a second like, whoa, this is a beautiful diagonal for the dark square bishop, and the two knights are kind of hanging. There's like a skewer, a deluxe skewer with lots of meat on that skewer right here. But he just does something very simple. A, he gets rid of the first knight by trading. How can this be wrong? And takes. And then have no illusion. This pin here is just not effective because he goes rook to d1. Again, following one of my more favorable rules that I tell students and people that I lecture to, and that is, when you have a bigger threat than your opponent, you do not have to respond to his threat. That is something that I really reiterate again and again, because people are young, especially young or new people, are very robotic. When they have their piece attacked, they think of nothing else but move that piece. Okay, or at least not entering a variation like this. Many times I see my scholastic players, a knight is attacked somewhere by a pawn, and the hand is already hovering like this over the knight. It's like nothing else is considered, just I'm going to move the knight, but where? And okay, sometimes you have to move the knight, but sometimes you can attack a rook or a queen, or start an attack, and that's 10 times better than just the automatic reaction. Now, of course, the knight is immune, because if bishop takes knight, rook d8, when the king moves, the rook on h8 goes bye-bye. So he needs to do something about it. He decided to go back with the knight, as good or as bad as any. Knight b5, another little tactical shot. Of course, the knight cannot be taken for the same reason of rook d8 check. Very, very nice. And yeah, in this position, it's just a technical win for white. He played king e7, releasing his king from jail and freeing his rook. However, after knight takes a7, white just has lots and lots of pawns. Knight f5, he's playing kind of by inertia. He could have resigned. Bishop e4, knight d4, king f1, king f6, c3, knight f5, the knight returns to b5. He takes this irrelevant pawn on h2, and white simply played a4, And in this position, a grandmaster at the level of Sokolov realizes that this avalanche of pawns on the A, B, and C files will never be stopped, definitely not cheaply, and it's time to resign. It's just completely futile and insulting almost at the grandmaster level to play. Watch how dominating this knight is to this bishop, and my pawn is just going to go like A5, A6, A7, A8. The bishop is controlling the queen square. This knight cannot even go back easily. Not via D6 and not via E7, just hopeless. So resigned. Okay, so the moral of this game is, again, with a special emphasis on our beloved viewer / host Mike Kummer, is pay attention to those games, learn from them, because others can perform better. The variation itself is definitely playable for both sides. Very exciting variation, but don't say that it's just completely lost for white, because, well, as this game showed, it isn't.